And he meets this man and he said, I do not believe in the God. I do not believe in God. And so this man asked him, like, okay, tell me about this God that you don't believe in. And then this man went on explaining, this God, is evil, he does evil in this world, and then how can God do blah 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 blah. He goes on, the whole 80s rant about the evil and injustice and the incoherence of God. And then after the entire conversation, this man of wisdom replies him and says, I too don't believe in the God that you don't believe in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope everybody is well, best of health, best of state. And welcome you. This is my first recording in Ramadan. To all my Muslim family, friends, acquaintances, the brotherhood of Islam, sisterhood of Islam, the entire Islamic family. Ramadan Kareem to all of you. May Allah grant you the best of Ramadans, give you the opportunities, and give us all the opportunities to gain the best out of this month, and to give us the strength to extend for us after Ramadan and into the next, inshallah. Anyway, so we ended our last talk, our last book reading, speaking about the problem science from booklet Heidegger for Muslims, and in there we discuss about the problems and problematic ways of how science can be applied, similar to what we discussed early on as well. And in there we ended the last video that is beneficial to look in the lens of science, and Sheikh Omar gave an example of using rate filter lens and how a rate filter lens can actually give you the different hues and shades of red in nature. But if you were to draw conclusions based on that observation using the red lens, what happens is you actually have not done justice to what it actually is. You have attempted to impose a certain perspective onto the world, which is your own. And then from that perspective, try to draw out conclusions. And that way of thinking, we have called it, as what he called it, superstition. And so, that is how we ended our last book. And then there's a few reflecting points from that, in our lives. It's like, give me an example. For example, if you have a friend, how we can apply it to our lives. If you have a friend and you haven't seen it for like 10 years, for example, and the last memory you have of the person is such as so and so, it's this way another. The problem with that, if you look at him in the way you have experienced him, then you have not put into justice, you have not put into and you do not put into consideration the 10 years of growth that he had. What happens is you will not see this person in the same way, the true way of how he is currently. There was 10 years of growth, 10 years of development, 10 years of maturity maybe, or the opposite is possibly true. So it's very important to see things for what it is, and this is a way of thinking that you can even transform your life. If you look at some person in a way that does not do justice to them, what do? You have done injustice. And one of the very important injunctions in Islam is adab. And one of the very interesting people of our time, Professor Nakib Alatas from Malaysia, he said that adab is putting things in its proper place, Islamic justice in a sense. So anyway, so that's a very important thing. A very important thing. Thinking has to do, and the way we think is also related to justice, and how can we apply that justice in our lives. So we're gonna go into the next segment, which is Sheikh Omar will discuss about the problem. What is the problem? If we look into the world using a scientific way of thinking. Let's go. What is the problem? The problem, as we said before, is the way or fashion of thinking. The way of thinking turns what must be taught away from it. But that which withdraws from this way of inquiry is in fact the most important part. that which withdraws from science is what true thinking is all about: truth. Heidegger wrote, "What must be thought about turns away from man, it withdraws from him. But what can we have the least knowledge of something that withdraws from the beginning? How can we give how can we give it a name? What withdraws refuses arrival." When Heidegger says from the beginning, he means the beginning of the way of thinking. That is, the thinking since Plato that we have called philosophy. We carry on. One of the ways in which Heidegger characterizes philosophy is that it is essential thinking. Essential thinking is a way of thinking which inquires about the essence of things. Heidegger wrote, "According to the ancient doctrine, the essence of a thing is considered to be what the thing is." We ask the question considering the essence of something when we ask, "What is it?" Here, let me give you a gigantic step forward that the kuffar cannot understand. You cannot define Allah by what, where, or how. Allah is beyond measure. He is not comparable to anything. The same is applicable to truth. Truth cannot be understood by asking what, where, or how. We reach Allah not by the inquisitive mind, but through another approach altogether. We are not the observers, we are the observed. We are not the questioning, we are the ones questioned. This is what the Sufis call ihsan. The difference between the two approaches is the leap. I think this is a very interesting part that we can maybe have a part of discussion. You see, this is one thing that's very interesting that like separates the Muslim from everything else. I remember having a discussion with one of my friends. He was giving a story of this man about there was this like professor from a university, educated man, professor at the elite level of education, and he meets this man and he said, "I do not believe in the God. I do not believe in God." And so this man asked him like, "Okay, tell me about this God that you don't believe in." And then this man went on explaining, this God, is evil. He does evil in this world, and then how can God do blah 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 blah. He goes on, the whole 80s rant about the evil and injustice and the incoherence of God. And then after the entire conversation, this man of wisdom replies him and says, "I too don't believe in the God that you don't believe in." So this is the very important thing, is that the scientific way of thinking has engulfed the entire way we look at the world. He has attempted to even define God into essential way of thinking, to define God into term definitions and words, an attempt to define God into a way which the mind can make sense of him, which is an impossibility in Islamic thought. We Muslims say, whatever you can imagine, that's not Allah. Whatever your mind can put into perspective that cannot be God. God is beyond comprehension. Laysa kamithlihi shay', which means that God is beyond nothing we can imagine. Nothing we can imagine. And words are just, when we use words to describe God, it is just an attempt to give an illustration of what it is. But it can never be it. When we say God is most merciful, we define the word merciful. We use the word merciful in our humanistic definition of what can be merciful. But God, Allah, is not defined in this humanistic perspective. Like, if you think mercy of God is defined by your human perception of what merciful is, then you have limited what God is. And this is one of the major problem I feel that why many people do not believe in God today, or many people fall into this idea of that atheism is amazing, is because they have restricted God into a perception which is not God. Allah is beyond all this, all what these people say. I think that's one of the reason why, and because we have not have the right approach about thinking about God. And this is why Sheikh Omar said something very interesting. You say give you a gigantic step forward that the kuffar cannot understand. I mean, words kuffar, we can discuss this word in the future, but basically it means a person who knows the truth and covers it up. He says you cannot define Allah by what, where, and how. Allah, there's no time and space attached to Allah. There's no thingness in our human experience that is attached to God. The idea where these Christian people have that human beings will create, if horses had a god, you will create the image of a horse. This idea is not within the Islamic paradigm. The Muslims believe and see and understand and recognize that God is not in any way in that measure. And the most important word or phrase that you can understand to understand the Islamic perspective of what God of God in Islam is laisa kamithlihi shay. Whatever you can imagine, whatever you can think, whatever you can say, whatever you can use logic, that's not Allah. Allah is beyond anything we can say. And if a person attempts to define Allah by these terminologies, what happens is you then restrict or you then delimit, because language is a limitation. Language by definition limits your ability to express. Like I can express to you what sweetness is, but my experience of sweetness is a whole different thing. And language is not able to fully express these things. And when we use language to define something which is incomprehensible, then that's where it falls short. Example, infinity. Like we can imagine infinity, but put it into words, it doesn't have the same feeling anymore. And then he goes on to the next part, which is very important, is because like one thing that we have developed over our years of education is that we have imagined that we are the observer of the world, but we are not the observer. We are the observe. I just like remembering, I was mentioning about the sea monkeys. I guess I had that feeling about why the sea monkeys. I had the feelings about the sea monkeys because I was observing it moving around, living its life. And the sea monkey probably did not even acknowledge my existence and did not even see that I exist. It was, I give it enough food, I give it enough the medium for it to exist, and so on and so forth, and it just lived. But it did not recognize, or probably his mind was not able to comprehend that I did it. Even I put that powders and something like that. And it's a very reflective of our human experience as well. Like in our mind, our limited mind, limited capacity to understand this world. What have we done? How have we imagined? What have we been imagining to be? What have we been thinking? Do you think we are this amazing, brilliant human being? But there's so much that we do not know. And really, we are literally like sea monkeys in a jar. Let's carry on. This understanding produces a complete change in our relationship to truth and thinking. It implies that we do not manufacture fashionable truth according to our fashion of thinking. There is no such thing. Whoever tries to reach truth with that way of questioning, it only encounters something else, himself. Truth withdraws from the essential questioning, which is the philosophical inquiry. If the inquiry is not aware of its limitation, he will think that the what comes forward as the answer of his inquiry is the truth, but it is not. And the inquirer will forever be confused. If the inquirer inquires about God, he will reach the concept of God, but not Allah. This is the world of theology. Theology doesn't think. I love that part. I mean, it's a very important thing to understand. Theology is important. It has its importance, and we must know the limits of theology. But today we are living because, and there are people, there are people who put an an extreme importance in theology. And historically, when you read the history books, like people don't really, when you look into the Islamic philosophy of God, it's a very simple understanding, Akida. When we go into theology, is where is what the problem happens. But also, you must understand that theology comes as a form of a defense. This is what we have understood, and we have to understand that theology is necessary to defend us, to understand the what can be said of God, what cannot be said of God. And after that, you do not need theology anymore. Theology has limitations, and we use theology to its benefit. And after that, we carry on from where we left off, from from what understanding He gives us. After there's a lot of our personal experience with Allah, and give us understanding in what we're gonna do. So I think it's best that we end down here. If he ended it pretty well. Basically, what we have read so far is just telling us to understand the limitations and how there is another way of thinking, and a thinking which involves the leap. And Shaykh Umar gave us a very interesting example about Allah, and how it is not possible for us to understand Allah in terms of language and to think of Allah. Allah is beyond our comprehension, beyond our thinking, beyond our language. And if anyone tries to restrict Allah into these terminologies, what happens is he will come into the concept of Allah, a concept of God, but our concepts is not Allah. And so, till the next one, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you everybody for watching The Pursuit for Meaning. And if you enjoyed and appreciated what we have put out here, you will help us a lot for you guys to like, share, and subscribe. And also, if you want to join our little community we are building, the links to the Discord is in the description below. Thank you. Bye.